This is Pixelated Audio, episode 99, featuring the music from The Adventures of Little Ralph on the PlayStation.
Welcome back to the video game music and retro gaming podcast, Pixelated Audio. I'm James, and this is Brian, and we also have Gene with us here today.
Hey, everybody.
How's it going, guys? Yeah, I'm excited because today we're talking about a game that James and I have been wanting to do an episode on for got to be the better part of a year now.
Yeah, at least 6 months.
Yeah, and we had Gene give it a shot. What'd you think?
I loved it. I think we talked about this a little off air, but nobody had really heard much about it before we started playing. It's sort of a fairly new one on our radar, and it was a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah, so great soundtrack, great gameplay. Chippoke Ralph no Daiboken is a game that I think everybody can enjoy, especially if you grew up with the platformers Mario, Wonder Boy series, anything like that. Really falls directly under that vein. The music is incredible, so we got a lot to listen to today and a lot to explore.
Yeah, the track that brought us in was the title theme called Start Our Adventure, and then we went directly into the Stage 1-1 theme, which was called Departure.
This track is, that first kind of opening is very cinematic, and it's kind of short, so we jumped directly into the stage track after that. That stage track, though, is so full of, happiness and, this childhood kind of, fantasy feeling. I don't know. I liked it.
Even the stage track felt very cinematic to me. It reminded me of something from an RPG where you'd go into the very first town, or something like Lunar,
I was just gonna say that,
flying around, and they're kind of giving you a overview of what you might see.
Kind of like a Maribia kind of vibe to it. Yeah. The other thing I liked about this track is it kind of reminded me of Tomba. Do you guys play Tomba?
Oh yeah, I've been playing Tomba recently, actually.
Oh really?
Yeah.
It kind of has that kind of almost slapstick sound to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Very playful and energetic and very lighthearted.
Yeah, it just feels fun.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote out, it's got all the usual tropes. It's peppy, it's upbeat, it sounds like you're going out on an adventure, and it's just so, I smile every time I play the first level on this one. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the character movements are kind of goofy and almost robotic and silly looking. In this song, as you play, it's almost like this funny dance.
Yeah, there is an overall kind of cuteness to this game that I can kind of see going with a little bit of a Tomba feel, with some of the enemy types are very cute, and some of the other visual things. So I did feel like this song did have a little bit of a weak kind of drum and bass section that I would have liked to see pepped up a little bit, but all in all, it was a very fun track that I would love to listen to over and over. So
yeah. So let's talk about this game a little bit. Chippoke Ralph no Daiboken, or The Adventures of Little Ralph, is a 2D action platformer released on June 3rd of 1999, right at the tail end of the PlayStation's kind of official lifespan. Right. Both developed and published by New Corporation for the Sony Playstation. Now, this is very early. I believe one of the earliest retro throwback games that fully kind of intended to mimic that 8 and 16-bit style of gameplay that came out just a generation before it.
Yeah, I mean, when the PlayStation came out, everything was 3D, and so to see a game that was all 2D, it was really cool to see.
Everything was going the polygon route. You needed to have something that was on the edge of what the technology could do, and everybody was making that jump, and it was really the craze. Everybody, you were buying up everything.
Yeah, everything was 3D.
Yeah, like Bubsy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you had like Parasite Eve, Final Fantasy, like we did Wild Arms, and that has some really ugly 3D in it, and it would have been much better probably as 2D. But I mean, everything had that feel, which now is charming. Back then it was cutting edge, then it got really ugly, and it didn't age very well. But now it's kind of charming again. But to see at the end of the system them say, you know what, let's do some 2D throwbacks.
Some games aged okay. In the 3D realm. You look at like Doom, stuff like it, because of the way that they did like the sprite mapping and stuff against, textures, everything kind of worked. But like games like Wild Arms, like that, the battle sequences and stuff. Ooh, God, that's...
Yeah.
Like
Final Fantasy 9 still looks great, but Final Fantasy 7, you have to have a taste for it.
You have to have like a prior... appreciation.
I mean, it was a bit of an awkward transition. Everybody was going from 2D to 3D, and people were just trying to figure out what worked, and a lot of it didn't. But
yeah, it's like starting all over again. Yeah,
yeah.
But anyways, music. So I think what is really awesome about the soundtrack and what makes it stand out, what makes the game stand out, is more than just being this incredible platformer. It's the soundtrack, and the soundtrack's not only amazing, but it actually has the whole soundtrack actually has a kind of PSG, in quotes, equivalent. And what's awesome about this is it's still sequence data, and kind of looking at other games that try to do maybe similar things with this retro throwback. This was really the first of its kind in commercial application, because remember, in 1999, the 8-bit music revival, wherever you want to call it, didn't really exist before, at least not in Japan.
Right.
And so for today's episode, I think it'll be pretty neat because we can do some comparisons with the instrumental version, and then maybe listen to like the PSG version, or kind of vice versa, depending on what tracks we picked for the episode.
Oh yeah, I always love when we do comparisons, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about New Corporation, the company that made this game. They were founded in 1991 as a small software house located in Chiba, Japan, and they started with their first title, Boxer's Road, on the PlayStation in 1995. They also ported Princess Maker to the X68000 in 97, Captain Commando to the PlayStation in 1998, and The Adventures of Little Ralph was in 1999. And then they did another boxing title right after that, based on the manga series Hajime no Ippo, Victorious Boxers, in 2000. But then the company kind of fragmented and went through this whole new reorganization, which led to a bunch of new stuff.
So around the time of Little Ralph, there were about 28 employees in New Corporation, but starting at around 2002, a number of the original staff members left to form other companies. Some of them include Think and Feel, who developed a few solo games and co-developed titles like Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings for Square Enix and Blood of Bahamut with Namco. They're not as active today, but they are still around. A second dev company that spun out was called Grand Prix, formed in 2003. Grand Prix did a number of boxing titles for the PS2, Wii, DS, and PSP, but then sort of fizzled out and went bankrupt around 2012.
It's kind of funny that they did those two boxing games, and then it seems like all the boxing people left to create this new company called Grand Prix.
Wait, we don't want to get confused. It's not new company, it's a new company.
A separate company called Grand Prix, which by the name by itself would sound like they would become making racing games instead of boxing games. So
racing right to bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So also, during New Corporation's reorg, another company was formed out of the original New Corporation, but this time out of their sales department in 2004, titled Ertain.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You don't hear too much about, like the sales and marketing side of a company splitting off and starting a whole new company still within game development.
I would be very doubtful that they were going to... I mean, if they were just going to be a publishing house, power to them. Like, that makes sense. That's their department. They kind of know the ins and outs of the marketing. But then they started doing like their own development too. They hired in some devs, and then they became like a full company. It didn't make any sense. Why even split apart then at that point?
When a cell divides, it's like it tries to repair itself. Like, well, we know how to run a dev company. Why don't we just actually hire the devs and do it?
Right. Yeah, it's like a starfish. They separated their arm, and then they grew a whole new company. But I mean, maybe part of it was they had their own ideas. Maybe they didn't want to make boxing games and stuff like that. So
maybe. I mean, so New Corporation Corporation, after all these, reorg and different companies spun off, they continued to pump out a few more titles that Urtain actually published. And then they apparently went bankrupt themselves in 2008. Urtain owned the rights to the company that developed The Adventures of Little Ralph, their software, but they were acquired a year later in 2009 by a company called Olivier that still operates today.
Yeah.
The old IPs like Ralph and Boxers Road, they've all been put out on PSN these days, so you can download them for like the PSP and PS3.
Which is cool.
Yeah, which is really nice, I think in Japan only. But I hate to say it, a lot of their new titles are really like shovelware-y. Like there's, those DS bargain bin games that you would never want to buy. Some have really great music, but like they're basically just to make a quick buck. That's kind of their deal. That's kind of like their thing. And they put out a bunch of these titles and they just looked mediocre.
Well, like small teams essentially making an app but putting it out on a console.
Right. Now, they do make an engine for Blu-ray players, which is like this visual novel engine. I guess that's kind of neat, but oh, and they also offer web design services. So, in case you didn't want to develop your software, they'll also do a website for you.
Yeah.
A GeoCities homepage.
If you look at the history of New Corporation, this is one of those situations where just everything came together for Little Ralph. It was like the dream team. And then after that, everything kind of fell apart. Like their earlier games are mostly ports or, remakes. And then they have this new original game that everything about it's great. And then they sort of go in all sorts of different directions.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like maybe they ran out of ideas because they went back to boxing right after Ralph, and then they kind of split. So maybe they were just like, hey, we want to do something new and fresh instead of like, I don't know, maybe Little Ralph didn't do great at the time, so we're seeing it and loving it. But at the time, maybe it was just another game that didn't sell very well, and they were kind of done making original games.
Well, and I also see it like this. There's a lot of you kind of look at it moving forward to today. There's a lot of indie devs who will have this kind of one-hit wonder kind of thing, and then you don't really hear from them again. When are we going to hear from the next Minecraft or like stuff like that, like where's like the next big game from these guys, and maybe this was the same, the same could be said for New Corporation. They found their one niche and then they're like, oh, we got nothing else. So anyways, we got a ton of great music to play.
Right.
Let's jump right into it. The next track we're going to hear is from stage 1-2 called Casua Watersupply. All right, that was from stage 1-2 called Casua Watersupply, composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou for The Adventures of Little Ralph on the Sony PlayStation.
What a cool track. I mean, this has that quirky, weird, like fun feel still, but it has like a hint of danger to it, which I really liked. And it's just the bass, everything was just so funky and fun.
It's really strange in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's very like like off-putting, and then it kind of. And what's up with that bass solo? Like,
the slap bass.
That came out of like nowhere. I heard that when I was driving in the car. I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah.
This game is it has a lot of charm to it. Right from the bat, like you can see the music itself is just very charming.
It does that thing that Mario does where it starts off nice and happy, and then all right, we're in the underworld. We're we're in the sewers. We're in the waterway. Let's get started. Let's get real.
Very, very awesome track though, and like I think it's kind of going to be interesting to we were talking earlier about doing some comparisons with like the PSG version. So that was the instrumental version. Do you guys want to hear the Casua Watersupply in PSG form?
Of course,
in quotes. All right, so here's just a few seconds of that. Kind of neat. It actually almost sounds better in PSG.
Yeah, and it's funny because when we first listened to the instrumental version, I thought the beginning has a little bit of a Castlevania feel, and then with the PSG version, I was like, that is very much has a Castlevania feel to the beginning. But it was so fun. Like I really liked it's kind of a toss-up. I can't tell which one I like more.
Well, some of these tracks that we picked today, we went through just the instrumental versions first, and we're just like, okay, let's pick all these tracks, and then they're so good in either form that we just kind of flipped them. So you're going to hear some PSG tracks today, just because they were great tracks regardless. So
yeah, I ended up playing through the game with the PSG version because I had listened to the full soundtrack and the instrumental, and I'm like, you know what, instead of listening to it the second time, I'm just gonna play with this in the background. It works really well in the game.
Yeah, the mechanics of the game just kind of complement the music anyway in that form. So it totally works.
Well, and everything about it too, with it being a throwback, it gives it more of that throwback feel. You kind of forget you're playing it on like PlayStation.
Totally.
And whereas the more instrumental, it kind of reminds you you're on a PlayStation, but you still have that kind of nostalgic feel for the look. So it's
totally.
really neat.
So what do we got next?
Next up, we have a track called Holy Battle from stage 5-1, and we'll be right back. All right, you just heard 5-1 or Holy Battle, composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma. Naoki Tsuchiya and Hideki Satou for The Adventures of Little Ralph.
Holy moly. What an
Yeah.
awesome track.
I'm ready to take it on. The whole game, everything. The
Yep.
boss, whatever you throw at me.
Yeah, this is a totally killer track. You know, I was asking Gene, I was like, hey, why don't you pick out some tracks that you like for the show and just, leave a note in, our document. And I see this track listed, and the reasoning you wrote was because, yeah. And no, it's a great track. I mean, this encompasses like really a lot of Japanese like rock and pop from the 80s. I think it kind of brings it all into one. It's got a lot of power, almost has like a ballad, very soaring, and just energetic, good feeling, like you're on the cusp of greatness.
Yeah.
Like just very empowering.
Yeah, it definitely had a more urgent feel, a little less silly and playful than the previous tracks we listened to, which is cool. To me, it has a much more dramatic, cinematic feel than what you would expect from a 2D platformer. Like, this still feels like RPG music. Like, there's so much emotion and story that feels like it fits into the song. It's very heartfelt.
I was going to say, this sounds a lot like, I mean, I know the Lunar soundtrack really well, but there's something about it that just gives me that vibe from the battle sequence. Do you want to hear the battle theme real quick? Hold on. Let's just listen to that. I can't remember. Maybe it's the Sega CD version. Let's take a listen real quick. Is this it? I don't know. Maybe it's the same horn or progression or drum. I don't know. It just gives me that vibe a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting Lufia vibes, same sort of thing, like
Oh, I
really
can
high
see
energy rock. I mean, it's all kind of in that same family of
Yeah.
sound.
I think that, well, I mean, again, this is using like the PlayStation, probably some of the built-in instruments too. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of overlap in that sense, maybe anyway. But excellent track. Do you guys want to hear the PSG version? Just like a.
Oh, yeah, I would like to see
course.
how that song translated to that.
Holy crap! That's so good.
Yeah.
Either way.
It feels like the cute little handheld version of of the game. I would love to play that.
Like the Neo Turf Masters
Yeah.
for the Neo Geo Pocket Color versus the the arcade version. Yeah,
Right.
totally.
I swear, if this game were made today, they'd have an on-the-fly switch. So you're like, whichever version you want, just listen to it right now.
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Or
yeah. Well,
unlock the PSG version or
that's
something.
the beauty of Wonder Boy, the Dragon's Trap, the new version. You could switch it on the fly.
Yeah.
So
I accidentally switched it a few times. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like with the graphics and everything too. And I was like, oh, it was a little jarring. But yeah, that would be pretty neat.
Yeah, Gene, so tell us about Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou.
Sure. So I did a bit of research on the three composers, and starting with Hiroshi Kuronuma, I didn't actually find all that much about him. The only things that I found credits for were Boxer's Road, New Corporation's first game, the port of Captain Commando. He's listed as composer there, but mostly it's a straight-ahead port of the original arcade game, so there's probably just like maybe one or two tracks.
Yeah.
And then
maybe
Little
just
Ralph.
maybe just arrangements too. But yeah.
Yeah,
Little
I
Ralph.
mean, I never played the PlayStation 1 version of Captain Commando, so I don't really know what's changed, but watching a couple of videos kind of dumps you into an intro screen with no music. You kind of do options or game start. There's not a whole lot there.
So basically, he did nothing.
I mean,
I'm just kidding.
I don't know. Both he and Naoki were credited for doing sound and music, but I'm not sure. Maybe there was like a custom credits song or something,
Right. So Naoki Tsuchiya, I actually think he might have been the lead for this project. He's got a little bit more credits to his name, but also his name was mentioned a few more times for actually doing the composition in some Japanese websites I found.
Yeah, it would make sense. He was the person who had the most credits of all of the ones that I found.
It
So
looked like they started a little earlier too.
Right.
That's true. Yeah. So I'll kind of go through real quick. He was credited as sound designer for Race Drivin', which is a port of an old 1990 Midway game, Captain Commando, Little Ralph, as the sound designer, not just as the composer.
Right.
A game called Kakuto Chojin Back Alley Brutal for Xbox and The Con for PSP. As a composer, he was listed for Little Ralph, Victorious Boxers, and several romance visual novel style games, which, Brian, maybe you can pronounce those.
Yeah, the Hokagono Love Beat. Love Beat, was that where you had trouble pronouncing?
Well, yeah, the second word there on the DS.
Oh,
Yeah.
sounds good to me.
And there's Otome Teki Koi Kakume Love Revo for the PS2. Whoa.
Yeah, so I didn't see too much about those, so I'm not sure, but he was also listed as a composer for Hajime no Ippo, the portable version for PSP, Victorious Spirits. I was listening to it, and actually there's a lot of similarities to that soundtrack from this one. So it's possible that he was the lead, just like you were saying. And most interestingly is he's listed as the voice actor for Little Ralph in this game.
Oh, that's so
Wait,
awesome.
no, really?
Yeah, I saw that in the credits.
Wait, when is there a voice in this?
Maybe like his
sound effects when he's
Yeah.
screaming and attack animations during some of the...
okay.
So they're like,
I
okay,
see
go. Yeah, stuff like that.
So choke on a carrot and we'll record
Yeah.
that. Naoki Tsuchiya, I actually found him. I found his like email and stuff like that. And I also saw him on Mixi, which is like this Japanese Facebook. I still have an account from like the 2000s. I found him on there and I messaged him and was like, oh, maybe we can, I could at least chat with him, ask him the whole thought behind this. And he hadn't updated like his profile in like, I don't know, like 6 years. So I was like, it's a long shot.
Yeah.
So never heard back, but it was worth a try.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always good to hear back, but sometimes we just got to do what we got to do.
Yeah, so Hideki Satou.
Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of credits either, but most interestingly, he was mostly a performer. So I found two main things other than Little Ralph, which is one, in the Clockwork Knight games, he's credited as a Pepperauchu orchestra member, usually on percussion, and he worked a lot outside of games in a Orchestra del Sol with Jun Takagi, which was a Japanese funk soul Latin kind of world music band from around 1994 to 2001, also as a percussionist, backup vocalist. So I'd say
His role may have been the percussion in this.
I don't know if it was maybe like assistance or sort of like supervision, like just sort of contributing in smaller ways.
Right.
But
Nothing is really defined, even as far as the soundtrack goes. And we'll talk about that later. But there's no real, like, this track was done by Tsuchiya. This track was
Right.
done by Sato. Like, we don't really have a way of knowing until we actually contact one of these guys. So
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned Clockwork Knight, because I hadn't even thought about that game until you and I were hanging out, Brian, and we were looking at different games to try to play, just goofing around for no reason. And you had mentioned Clockwork Knight, and I was like, oh, I've totally forgot that I had that game as a kid, and now hear it mentioned again in this episode. It's so funny how there's all these little connecting threads all over the place.
little stars aligning. Maybe we're just going to have to play that game later.
Yeah.
So, we were saying before, one of the most unique things about the game is the music. We mentioned both versions, the PSG and the instrumental versions before, but they use a slightly different driver. So there is a PSG version of the same driver for sequence audio. And I think what's actually going on, and I'm not really certain, is that it's just a instrumental switch. So the PSG version isn't actually PSG. It's not even really samples of PSG, more of a novelty named, kind of
Right. Nostalgia.
and stuff like that. It's just approximating the sound with these kind of simple square wave tones. However, there's also a bit of smoke and mirrors there. So we're listening to this PSG. It sounds really, really clean. But, there's also some effects thrown in on that. There's echo on the same PSG channels. There's a lot more to work with. So, even though it does sound incredible as PSG, we're also hearing, a modern take on PSG.
Yeah, I think it's funny how it's approximating something that's approximating something, and then it seems like something like you would expect from, say, like a modern sprite-based game on, say, like the Switch or something that has gradients and different textures that you couldn't get on an actual like older system.
Like they're just doing it to do it.
It just makes it look a little bit prettier, or maybe that's how you remembered it as a kid, is what it feels like. But I think that's funny that they took, and it wasn't an exact replica. They
Yeah.
just kind of spice it up a little bit.
Yeah,
too.
I've heard that just said a lot about modern indie games. It's like they represent games how you remember them, not how they actually are.
Right,
Like,
right.
Shovel Knight is a great example. It uses the expanded sound chip, but you're like, oh, this sounds just like it did on the Nintendo. But if you go back, it's like, wait, no, this is way simpler.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into some more music. Gene, what do we have next?
So the next track is called High and Alone from The Adventures of Little Ralph on PlayStation. That was High and Alone by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou.
Ooh, good track.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of my college years. It's funny. James actually said that just a little while ago, and I was thinking the same thing because we were both losers.
I saw the title and thought, I'm not going to make a comment. I'll let
We don't care. Anyways, yeah, this is a great track. I think there is a lot of power in the drum kit. It's very good, as opposed to maybe that track that you weren't too keen on in the beginning of the episode. The percussion, anyways. It's got kind of like an 80s. There's this transition, I think, in Japan where like enka was kind of like getting introduced. The style was kind of getting introduced into pop music a little bit, and so it's kind of got that enka pop feel to it. I really like that kind of trait about it. It could have been maybe like a composition style or technique that they wanted to go with, based on High and Alone. I'm not exactly sure where it is in the game. I can't remember. But again, it's a great track. And then you get this really cool, like, kind of organ, just accompaniment that just shoots out of nowhere. I like it.
Yeah, I think this track, I was saying before how some of the other ones felt kind of like very cinematic. This one feels more like stage theater to me. Like, everything's very exaggerated. Like, it's very dramatic. It feels kind of, it has that kind of tinge of pain when that guitar comes in. It feels like you're kind of choking back tears a little bit, and like you're on this mission and it's hard and you want to give up. But that exaggeratedness I really enjoyed, because it made it like when you're playing the game, it's hard to not notice it. Like on a stage performance, people in the back can still see the exaggerated movements. So while you're playing the game, you can still. It's like the composers were like, "Hey, we're not just background music here. We're gonna make this game really great." And this track, especially for me, made it hard to not notice it.
Yeah, so more like FGM instead of BGM.
Yeah.
I really like how the first half has those super strong beats to contrast. It's like doom, doom. You know, it feels like you just have to pay attention to it. And then when the second part settles in, you can kind of just go along with the level. But it's just such a powerful opening. I really love, and I wonder if this is partially because of Hideki Satou, but it's got these sort of jazz and Latin influences. It definitely sounds like it's got that feel to it.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on some of the Latin influences. It felt kind of like a choreographed dance a little bit almost.
Yeah, do you guys want to hear the PSG version just a little bit? Yeah.
Anytime.
A lot more like jarring and kind of like staccato or tenuto. I like that sound.
Yeah,
It loses a lot of impact. I actually like the instrumental version a lot better.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Yeah, but you can see even in that PSG version that it has that really exaggerated, like you said, it's kind of harsh, the transitions, and it still had that feel.
Like it's almost like flamenco, and not in any sense of like the genre, but like how flamenco is very like kind of exaggerated dance. You know what I mean?
Colors and
right, and it's very
and
like snap into positions. It's kind of got like that, but like the musical version of the dance, I guess. So the Adventures of Little Ralph, it's got a story. Right? It's a little bit odd, but why don't you enlighten us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you guys have listened to the show a lot, you're used to these stories not being crazy unique. This is another example of this. So this is another world where the peacefulness is interrupted by the growth of a great evil or demonic force. Like I said, it doesn't really stand out above everything, but this is how it starts. And then you always have that character that stands up and fights, and this is Ralph. But what happens that stands out, kind of interesting about this game, is Ralph gets turned into a child very quickly in the game by Valgo, who's the bad guy. And you might be thinking, well, how, if he couldn't stand up against Valgo as an adult, how is he going to take down this boss as a child?
Right.
So this magical sword appears out of nowhere and gives him the power to, continue his mission. And to add to the
I like how just stuff happens. It's just, there's no explanation. Just a sword appears. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And to add to the stacking up of the tropes in this, Ralph, his friend, this female friend, she comes to try to help him after he's been turned into a child, and she ends up getting captured by Valgo because he sees a hidden power within her. So now Ralph is not only trying to stop this evil, he has to save his friend who is been captured because of him. So it's not like saving the world is enough. He has to save his friend as well.
She's on the screen for like 30 seconds maybe, and like all of a sudden she's got these powers and stuff. What's funny about this game, so it's like this retro throwback. I think that was all the intent. It was meant to be like haha, look at all these like goofball stories back in the day that just crap didn't make sense, and let's go ahead and just put that in the extreme form and recreate the same idea just in our way.
Well, the cutscene opens with Valgo punching your girlfriend in the stomach and throwing her over his shoulder like in the original Double Dragon. Basically, it's like, that's the first thing I thought. Like, why? What? Okay, and I guess that's happening.
And then, he transforms Ralph into a little boy, and he's just like this naked little boy, like on the screen, like scrunched up in a ball, just like laying there, like he's just gone through like he's just been birthed or whatever.
Well, and I think that maybe it was like kind of like not just like a nod to the retro feel, but almost kind of poking fun at overly serious dramatic games. Like, we've mentioned the Final Fantasy games a couple times because of the PlayStation, but games like that were being taken very seriously. The stories were very dramatic. I mean, they would bring people to tears. And now you have a game like this that on paper really doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't take away from how fun the game is to play.
And the charm. Right. Anyways, so let's get into some more music. Up next, we have Into the Darkness, and we're going to actually play the PSG version. So let's take a listen, and we'll be right back. right, that was from Stage 3-1 called Into the Darkness, and this was the PSG version composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou for The Adventures of Little Ralph on the Sony PlayStation. What'd you guys think?
It was
creepy.
Really
it was a little-
dramatic.
It was. I really liked it. It was fun. It was very kind of spooky. There was a lot of different stuff going on, so it wasn't so simple like what you would expect. And I would assume that the instrumental version is also still very complex.
Well, let's take a listen to that version real quick.
Yeah, I think that one translated really well to both versions. Unlike the last one, like how we said, kind of lost a little the oomph. That one was still very, very dramatic and still creepy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, this was one of the ones I marked as we should play this track for the PSG version, so I totally agree.
Yeah. I think that the PSG version is, I guess they're both just really good. I can't pick between the two. They're both pretty awesome. I'd say the instrumental version we heard just a little bit of, but you can hear the backgrounds playing different instruments, where this is, just the PSG version is just like the square waves, kind of different, octaves and different tones. But it still sounds really clean either way. I like it. All right, let's get into another track. What do we got, James?
Next up, we have stage 4-2 called Ruins of Donan. You just heard stage 4-2, Ruins of Donan, from The Adventures of Tiny Ralph.
Interesting that you said Tiny Ralph.
Oh, did I say Little Ralph?
Either one.
Yeah.
It's a translation, so I guess Little Ralph. Either one. This is a cool track. It's kind of got a kind of an opera feel to it.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually a track that it feels like it was perfectly designed for me to love. I loved this one a lot. This is probably my favorite one so far we've played.
Really?
Yeah, and it's it's very repetitious, but that constant vibration sound in there, I love that. The way that it built up, and it just kind of like kept going up a notch, and then the solo to bring it back down was just, it was so good to me. And that really...
So good to me.
Yeah, the really dramatic, like, dark, ominous feel to the song was really pleasing for me as well.
Nice.
So I don't know if this is a good time to talk about this, but if you're playing on normal mode, there's actually more to the game. So this is actually right around the midpoint if you're playing the full 8 stages.
Right.
So it's got that perfect energy for like, there's a baseline of energy, there's some stuff going on, it's not like super happy, it's right, it fits right in the middle of the game. It makes perfect sense.
But it's got the build too.
Oh, yeah.
To kind of gear you up for the next part of the experience. So it doesn't just leave you flat like, hey, this is the end. If you played on easy mode or whatever, but it does kind of lead you into that next experience that you're going to go through. So I think that's good. It's a really great track. I really like the instrument version a lot better than the PSG version. But you want to hear that real quick?
I could see this one maybe not translating as well.
See the merits, but
it was all still there. But when that build-up part that was coming, it's like do 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 do, and then it's like do do, and it felt
missing
like
a lot.
It felt almost out of key or something. Like it felt like maybe
a little dissonant.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this sounds a little off. But I mean, it was all still there. I could see the correlation between the two.
It does drift a little bit more into the background compared to the instrumental, which I was closing my eyes just listening to it, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of remember why I don't remember the PSG version when I played it.
No, the instrument version has a ton of channels thrown in there, where it really sounds like there's like 3 different voices and and just the percussion, and it's a lot more simple. But in this track, I feel like it's just leaving a bunch of empty gaps. For what we were hearing in the other version. Anyways, so this game we're talking about the music. It's an amazing game to play as well.
Yeah,
and there's a lot to the gameplay, even for kind of trying to recreate this kind of retro simple style game.
Right. So the gameplay starts out kind of simple, like you said, but that's the great part about it. I feel like a lot of games are overly complex. They're hard to pick up and play. The Adventures of Little Ralph is so easy to pick up. It feels very much like a retro game because you just have basic controls like jump, run, dodge, attack.
There's 2 buttons.
Yeah. It's really simple. You have a special attack that can build up, and it's like a golf swing. It's kind of funny because you can send enemies flying around and they can bounce off each other and deal damage, and you can build up combos and stuff. But this is an instance where on paper it sounds boring, but that's what makes it great.
Some of you are going to be thinking like, oh man, this is right up my alley, right away. The other 20% of you might be thinking like, I don't know. Give it a shot. You will love it.
Yeah, because if you look at some games that are amazing, look at the original Mario. You run, you jump. That's it. That's the whole game. And you'd think that on paper, you're like, what? This is nothing. But it's timeless because it's so simple.
Yeah, it makes it very easy to pick up and just enjoy. There's a few different things. So you mentioned the kind of golf swing thing. That'll not only shoot enemies across the screen, but it'll also shoot back projectiles.
Oh, yeah,
yeah. So if like a boss shoots a fireball at you, you can like swat it back at him and stuff like that. It takes some time to execute correctly, but it's really cool. There's also this downward stab that you can perform by holding down an attack while you're in the air. It's a lot like the Adventures of Link, Zelda 2. It's like the simple things like that make the game. It feels like there's a lot more buttons and a lot more action than there really are.
Right, and I think that element right there gave the game more of a speedy feel to it because, like in Zelda 2, you can kind of go up to enemies and attack them while you're moving past them to keep them from attacking you, which was a nice way to not have to get stuck and kill everything. And it was one of the great things about this game as well.
So, not just the controls, but let's kind of talk about the platforming element of the game. So it's a lot like your Marios, your Wonder Boys, Strider, Ghosts and Goblins. I'd say it's a lot like Ghosts and Goblins, actually.
Yeah, there's even some sort of limited physics where once you commit to a jump, you can reverse directions, but it's a bit harder, so you have to know generally where you're going.
Right.
Oh my God, that force level where there's like the floating, floating logs or whatever that move back and forth like super fast. I swear to God, they designed the controls to be just hard enough or just impossible enough to not make that jump easily.
That part did take me quite a while. As far as some of the other parts, some of the ice mechanics made it difficult too. But this game also has power-ups you can find. I remember if you went out of your way a little bit in the ice section, there was a pair of boots that you could get that made it so you didn't slip on the ice anymore, and it was very useful.
I never found those.
But they they put it in the corner, and then once you get it, you're kind of surrounded by enemies, and so they had a really good job of making things worth getting, but
you had to go out of your way to get them.
and you had to practice getting them too, so you may take some damage, but now you may not fall off the ice. So
and the rewards are pretty much, they're in line with, like, the harder they are to get, usually the more valuable they are. So like the easy ones to find are things like a shield, which gives you another hit before you die, and then the sword extension, which just makes your slash a little longer. There's also these fireballs.
Yeah.
Those are really hard to find, and there are very few of them, but if you get them, you can shoot a projectile and hit enemies from pretty far away, and almost every enemy dies in just a few hits, so it's a really good power-up.
But if you lose it, you've lost it.
There's also a little familiar guy that you can follow, who can follow you around and sort of fire with you, so there's sort of two projectiles.
He kind of like lobs these little rock things in the air. It kind of looks like you ever seen the movie Totoro?
Yeah.
It looks like a little mini Totoro.
The little one,
around.
like the half invisible one.
Yeah. But the game mechanics, they're very straightforward, very simple. But when I first played it, I was like, oh my God, this is what I've wanted for a long time. Just a simple platformer that has a lot of elements there and a lot of exploration. And that's something actually I kind of want to talk about too. A great feature in this game is all the different paths you can discover. Over the years, we kind of, that character, that quality kind of has gotten lost. And, it's in RPGs and stuff like that in a different way. But just something that seems like a very linear, A to B kind of gameplay style, this kind of gives you like a ABCD, and it depends on how you're thinking and how you're feeling to kind of determine the outcome of which way you which way you end up.
Well, and I think that kind of speaks to what Gene was saying about some of the things that are more difficult to get are more worth getting. So the different paths, they have different things for you, and there's power up collectibles, there's like little fruit things to collect, and
that fruit,
that's a whole separate mechanic. It's like almost a cornerstone of the game, even though it doesn't seem like it.
You can totally ignore it or and play the game just fine, but I think it's an integral part of the experience. So let's talk about the fruit real quick before we talk about anything else, because I think this is awesome. So the fruit mechanic, if you've ever played any Wonder Boy game, this is exactly the same thing. So there's invisible fruit like kind of throughout the stage. And if you jump on an area, or if you get in a certain vicinity, they appear, and they'll appear in like a chain. And as you collect them, it kind of gives you this multiplier. But if you don't collect them right away, they'll disappear.
Right.
And this game is all about kind of that retro feel. So points are what kind of determine how good you're playing. So I think it's a very important aspect of the game.
Yeah, and for me, growing up as a Mario kid, I wanted all the coins. So I saw the fruit, and I was like, I want that fruit, and it'd die. I'm gonna go for the fruit again. I want it.
Oh yeah, it's designed exactly. So there's sort of two functions of the fruit. One is to lead you to specific paths, and also for the score multipliers. But sometimes you want to intentionally ignore it, because it's like, I see two pathways. If I follow the fruit, it's going to go one place. But what's over here?
Yeah. Right. It's meant to kind of it's the troll fruit. I love it. But it's got all of the classic kind of earmarks for a retro game. Something that kind of does, like you were saying, lead you to a different path or stray you a different way. And I think that's a very important aspect.
Yeah. Now, that isn't everything that this game has to offer as well. So when I came over one day and Brian was like, hey, I have this game for you to try out. I've been playing it. It's really fun. I think I got like partway through it, and I want you to try it. So I sat down and started playing this game
on the actual PlayStation.
Yeah, on the actual PlayStation, and ended up getting through the entire game in one sitting while we were hanging out. It was like maybe like hour and a half, maybe 2 hours or something like that. But I discovered that there is a whole nother gameplay style to this game.
You're like, hey, Brian, look at this. Look at this. What's going on here?
What is happening? So there's 2 points in the game where it switches from a 2D platformer to a 2D fighting game, something like Street Fighter. And Ralph is changed back into an adult with a sword.
Like temporarily.
Yeah, and you straight up punch and kick and use your sword slash against 2 different bosses. And it's hard. It's not like, oh, this is this new mechanic, let's take it easy on you. They are hard right from the bat.
Oh yeah, life bars pop up, and it's one-on-one versus time.
Yeah, and it's actually a really good fighting game.
Yeah,
and there's a full list of moves and combos that you can do. There's Hadoukens and your backward Hadouken.
There were some moves that looked very similar. But and even like some of the fighting style, like the way the sprites were very similar. But it was really cool. At first I was like, this is really odd. I wonder if they're going to do it more in the game. Got all the way to the end, and they only did it one more time. But it was kind of fun. It was like they gave you a precursor to it, and then for the final boss, they were like, let's go for it hardcore.
I'll put a little asterisk on that, because since I had looked at all of the titles for the game and the soundtrack, I'm like, wait, what's all this like after stuff? Oh, I see. There's an easy ending. So I actually went into the options in the beginning and put it on normal, because I knew there's actually more levels after stage 5.
Right.
Because there's 2 versions of the stage 5 music. It's like boss, and then like, oh, well, it's not really the boss. Just go on.
Yeah, it's like Double Dragon. Like if you played it on the easier modes, you didn't get the full game, which is kind of neat. It gives you that replayability. You play it through and you're like, oh, this is really fun. Let me try making it harder and see if I can get all the way through it again.
I mentioned that because there's actually 5 battles of that sort of one-on-one.
Oh, there is.
Yeah,
right.
So there's 3 more if you go into the harder level.
Because I think it defaults to easy mode.
Yeah, and I was.
It does.
You were just like, try it, and I probably wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. There are a few more instances, because I played through the other day too, and I was like, oh man, I don't remember this many.
Yeah.
But those crazy 2D one-off battles aside, the boss battles are actually really, really fun and kind of remind me of any other boss battle, like any Zelda game, any even Sonic games. You got a lot of that in there.
The boss battles are like the standard 2D platformer style boss battles are so good. Like they're so creative. Sometimes you're confused as to what you even need to do, or if you're actually doing it right, and then you're rewarded with killing them. But it's not. It never felt super frustrating for me. It was really fun. And when we get to the graphics section, we'll probably have a lot to say about some of these graphics. But and then you find out by beating the game, or at least in the mode that I beat it in, you unlock the 2D fighting from the get-go. Like you can sit there and there's the characters, and you can just boss battle it out with each other over and over, which is really cool.
So yeah, coming up next, we have the versus mode select, or Let's Begin the Battle, and this is the PSG version from The Adventures of Little Ralph. that was the PSG version of Versus Mode Select, or Let's Begin the Battle.
I thought this track was awesome.
So good. I have a hard time believing that the instrumental version can top that. Like, it's so, like, it felt so complex and so rich and dynamic, which we've seen some of the other PSG songs, not many of them, but some of them felt kind of flat and empty.
Like, well, the last one was,
yeah.
the Donan or whatever, yeah. Well, let's listen. I picked this track for the show because the instrumental version was, like, so killer. Mm-hmm. And then I heard this and I'm like, oh, yeah. So let's take a listen.
And it's such a unique mode to the game, too.
Right. Let's quickly listen to that instrumental version, though.
I think I'm gonna have to give this one to the PSG version, actually.
I believe so too.
It's funny, the instrumental version to me sounded so much like Super Punch Out. Like, I was just like, I just imagined the character, and it sounded very Super Nintendo, but very specifically to me, Super Punch Out.
I really like that. The instrumental version, I was like, oh man, this.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good. It's got a lot of grunge, this really heavy hitting drum kit, and then I heard the PSG, and I was like, it's just too good to leave out. We gotta listen to that one.
It's so dark and serious for like a character select screen too.
I know. Let's talk about the development history a little bit. So contrary to the simple, in quotes, sprites and look of the game, it took a considerable amount of time to develop. Mm-hmm. So originally, the game was developed for the Sharp X68000. New Corporation had just released the port of Princess Maker for the X68000 in 1997, which was also one of the last commercially made games for the system. Maybe the last, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when the decision was made to switch over to the PlayStation, they almost had to start over because I guess some of the code just wouldn't port directly. And so they kind of took their time. That's why we see this big gap, this 2-year gap, right, where they were basically developing Little Ralph. And so they could have abandoned the project. We saw a lot of other companies that did, a bunch of work on something, and then they would just abandon the project because, it didn't make sense financially, or maybe, when they started development, they were going one direction, and then, the systems and company and society kind of pivoted to liking something else. It just goes to show that there's like this real, true intimacy behind the project, and the people who worked on it really wanted to make this game like a reality. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of charm, like you were saying, and it kind of caused the not only the development team but maybe marketing to say like, hey, we should keep this one on our plate, and for a good reason, because we talked about the other games they did, and it wasn't really anything all that remarkable.
Yeah.
So, even though the game attempts to emulate that kind of 8 and 16-bit style from the era, it was genuinely born on a 16-bit platform.
Yeah.
So, it's even more odd to me that this retro game that came out way too soon for like reintroducing retro was actually from the system it was trying to kind of recreate. It's like this weird like paradox of like development and like gaming, paradigms all in one.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that it was like for the X68000, and then the 68000 is like, nah, we're done making games. You're too late. And then instead of making something for the PlayStation that fit what the PlayStation was really doing, they were like, let's just do something that looks retro.
Right.
And so maybe it was more like, this is what we want to do, instead of like, let's do something different.
Well, and they were at the tail end of the X68000 like releases, and then they kind of just squeezed into the last of the PlayStation releases. So who knows? Maybe this could have been on PS2 and it would have been like more like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see the retro thing coming back. I don't know.
Yeah, it could have just been one of those fashionably late things. It's like, well, we missed the boat on that one. Let's just release the game and call it retro and throw in a PSG soundtrack and make it feel like we did this on purpose.
Man, that just made it sound not as fun.
Well, no, I mean, like, you were saying this, and I really cannot think of a game that did that sooner.
I don't think there is one. I think this is like the kind of first of its kind to recreate like a retro thing. Because I mean, that wasn't even a thing yet. You either played retro games or you know, nobody was making the old style new again.
It's like they weren't even really considered retro yet. It wasn't that old. Like some people were still like going out and getting, you know, games for their systems that were doing like Super Nintendo and Genesis. It wasn't like that crazy to be like, I just got a new Genesis game.
Like, wasn't Donkey Kong like 96 or 97? Like some of the later Donkey Kong games.
Yeah, like
right?
the last one was 96 or 97. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like right when like N64 came out. So I mean, it's not really a long. There's like 4-year gap there. You know, it's not that long. Anyways, let's get into some more music. We got a track from Stage 5-2. It's called "In the Citadel of Ice." All right, that was from Stage 5-2, In the Citadel of Ice, composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou.
Oh, man. So out of the three of us, I'm probably the one that has played it. It's been the longest since I've played it.
It's been about 6 months, right?
Yeah, and as soon as this song came on, I was just like, I remember this part. And this is where Brian and I were sitting here, because I think this was maybe a level past than you had gotten when you were first playing.
Right.
And I was like, this is so good. Like, we have to do this game at some point. Like, this song was incredible. It had like this psychological, like horror, icy feel to it. Like it reminded me a little bit of like Clock Tower, like how like scary it is, but there's nothing really like super sinister
about it. There's something else is going on. I remember this too. We were both sitting in here, and this track is the first one that we kind of looked at each other and we're like, this is an episode. And since then, it's been in our pocket for today.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I even just stood there in the level and was just like, this is so good. I gotta hear this more.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be honest, when I listened to the soundtrack, I was doing it a little bit in the background, but when I heard it again with full attention, I'm like, oh, I really should have listened to it in the instrumental again before this episode. It's so heavy and dark, and it's pulling on, like you said, those 80s horror. It's got like that Halloween theme kind of buried in there, and I love it.
I almost feel like it's really heavy in one ear. So those kind of starry high-end PSG notes that are even in the instrumental version, it's almost like you're catching like a shooting star, and it's like you're holding it in a basket in your left ear, and then all of a sudden the drums will cut in, and it's like somebody with a big hammer smashing them all, and then it starts back up, and it's even faster and more aggressive. It does feel very icy and very desolate and very creepy. And
when I think having the PSG stuff in there gave it a real sharpness that kind of adds to it. A lot of games, when you see them do like an icy theme, there's kind of like this like really edgy like hardness to the sound that makes it feel icy. But
a lot of echo or something.
Yeah, and I thought this had like a fit the theme. It felt very kind of icy, but it wasn't like a very cliche trope to me.
Right.
And then the guitars and everything in there was just like, whoa, like it's cutting through everything. It was really cool.
I know. And we're saying PSG, but it's probably more like almost like a school piano or something. Sad, it's very like kind of cut off piano ringing. But let's get into our next set of tracks, and this is actually kind of interesting. So Gene, you were talking about how there's different music for different levels of the gameplay. So not just levels, but easy mode versus normal mode, there's a little bit of a difference in how the music actually works out. So this next track, this is the boss for Valgo. It's the easy version. So let's take a listen to that, and then we'll listen to the normal version of Valgo. But let's take a listen to this first.
You just heard the easy mode boss music called Valgo.
Very menacing, very dark and quick and dangerous and nasty. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked how it starts off and feels kind of dangerous, like you were saying. And there's a part where it feels like it gets very heroic. And to me, it felt like the hero has shown up, and maybe he gets beaten up a little bit in the beginning, and you get this is whole new gameplay style, and you're just like, okay, cool, now I got it. And now maybe the boss is kind of a little bit worried.
Maybe the odds are a little in your favor now.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of like a whole bunch of different themes kind of mixed in the middle. There was like some different solos and some different sounds that I thought was kind of neat. It gave it like a battle feel, like there's different types of moves.
And that bass solo again, just gotta say,
I really loved that when the track comes in, it starts off with those arpeggios. It's sort of like picking up where that ice level track left off, and then it just goes on to its own thing.
Right, because this is right after that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because like the boss is just at the end of a stage. It's not a separate stage.
Right. And
it really I'll say, if I had played it on easy, not knowing that there was a normal difficulty, I would not feel cheated at all. Like, it's suitably epic. It's like a hard boss fight. The music is great, and it's a real nice end cap to the game. And then it would have been, like, I can imagine being a kid being like, what? There's a whole different, mode here with more levels?
That's me. I mean, until we started doing research for this episode, I didn't know that I'd only played the easy mode and that wasn't the full game.
Well, I didn't know either.
It felt like a full game to me, and then unlocking the 2D fighter mode, I was like, man, this game's got so much. I didn't feel like I needed more.
Yeah, it wasn't until I looked at the soundtrack that I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to this than I thought.
Yeah, I definitely need to go back and play the normal mode now.
Well, speaking of the normal version, let's actually listen to the boss theme for Valgo the Artistic Murderer. All right, that was the Stage 5 boss theme on normal mode called Valgo the Artistic Murderer, composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou for The Adventures of Little Ralph.
Woo!
First off, I really like that title. I don't know if that's we've seen a lot of composers say that they have no idea who named the themes of the songs, but I like that he's not just like a savage monster. Like there's an art form. There's something to it that's not just.
He's an artistic murderer.
Yeah.
He's got the class.
Well, he could have killed you right in the beginning, but he just decided, I'm going to turn you into a kid instead. Why not?
Yeah, because that's a little more artistic.
Yeah, exactly.
And we wouldn't have had a game to play.
See, he did it all for us. This track is quite interesting. First of all, the track names, to kind of go with what you're saying, these are all coming from in-game.
Okay.
There is a soundtrack or a sound test that you can go through, and all of the track titles are actually listed there. So we're not just coming up with these, and they're not just part of like a CD compilation. This is actually what they're titled in the game. And I find it interesting that they gave it two different unique tracks for essentially the same fight.
Right.
The first one does feel more of like an ending. Like Gene was saying, you could have ended it right there and it would have been fine. This though is it's almost got like a dance to it, I don't want to say like Streets of Rage in the sense of the music, but like almost like you're going back alley through a casino or something. You're hearing music playing in the background, like Beverly Hills Cop or something's going on.
Yeah. No, it definitely had a different feel, and I think that was really clever of them to keep that in mind when deciding to make a game. It's kind of like Double Dragon, that if you don't play it on the hardest mode, you're not getting the full experience, but you also don't feel cheated. Like when you finish Double Dragon on easy, there's like, oh, you got this far, do it again, but on hard mode if you want to see the end.
Right, Double Dragon 2.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of leads to the soundtrack. I mean, maybe it was a completely conscious decision by the composer being like, oh, we have an opportunity to make another track that will lead you on further into the game. Let's completely change it up. Maybe it wasn't.
They didn't have to do that at all. I mean, they could have just played that last track and continued the game on, but it made sense to step the energy down a little bit to be like, yeah, okay, so. And then when the level's over, like, okay, so there's more after this.
Yeah, you kind of caught up to him, and then you're probably feeling like you're doing pretty good, and then the boss is supposed to make you feel like
kind of beat you down a little bit, beat your spirits down.
It's funny because there's something like listening to this song out of context. There was something about it that I picked up on that dance feel right away, and I just could not get the picture out of my head of like Valgo. Like you catch up to him, and he's like this like naked looking dude, and then he just like puts on this like 90s dance club outfit, and then there's like fog machine. He puts on like a dance fight shirt. Yeah, he just like puts on like this dance fight, like you don't know what you're up against type thing, and I just couldn't get it out of my head, and I just thought it was so funny.
Every time I drive and listen to this soundtrack, because I've been listening kind of the last few weeks, off and on through the car, and I hear this track, and I immediately start dancing with it. I'm like, dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. And I just anytime a track can make me want to sing along to it, there's something special there.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the track names, and they actually got moved over into the semi-physical release of the soundtrack. So the Adventures of Little Ralph original soundtrack, kind of like Neural Gear, was released 10 years after the game came out in 2009 by Egg Music. This was a digital only release, so that's why it's not exactly a physical copy, but you could download the whole...
Because it came out so late.
Yeah, it came out so late.
Digital downloads were a thing.
That was the thing. So one track is about 100 yen, like 100 yen, so about $1, or you could buy the full album for 22,000 or 2,200 yen, which is like $23, $24, something like that. And that includes all 122 tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
that's definitely...
You get your money's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 61 tracks for just the instrumental mode, and then the PSG is the full 61 again in its own style. And so definitely if you can pick up the album, it's totally worth it. And I plan on purchasing it myself. I think hearing it, because he's doing the recording I think Haley actually put this together. He's doing the recording through the PlayStation hardware. So like what we're hearing is not emulated. It's actually the real
Right.
deal. And that's the cool thing about Egg Music. They try to keep everything as real and true as they can. They try to avoid any kind of emulation or anything like that.
Yeah,
I should really do a write-up sometime on how to purchase music from for non-Japanese people, because it's really a pain in the ass until you get it going, and then once you have it all set up and kind of dialed in, it actually works. There's so much money to just blow on music. It's great.
But they do such a great job. Egg Music has been an invaluable resource, and like they're really, really good about trying to be comprehensive and getting like, what is every possible version of this soundtrack we can get? It's not just like, well, here's the album, throw it up there.
Right.
Oh yeah, you get a lot of games that are released with a like an add-on, like you buy the game and it comes with a CD, but it's like 5 tracks of like the 60 some tracks that are on the game, and so it's really neat to see that they're like, this is everything that you could possibly want. And really hearing how many tracks there are, 122, that really makes it clear, like what we were talking about with the decision to make the 2 versions of basically the same part in the game. It's just one was the end and what was like the middle part. It just made it clear that they really wanted to jam this thing with music.
They put a lot of love into this audio department for sure.
Yeah, and even making the quote unquote PSG version was just extra work that they didn't have to do,
right?
But they did, so it was really neat.
Yeah. So Egg Music, totally awesome. In fact, Haley, do you know Vork? He's the guy that kind of puts this. He's kind of in charge. He's the chiptune dude, the guru of Japan. He's the one that kind of brings that scene kind of back into the masses, and he's a really nice guy. We got to get him on an episode. And, I've told him about expansion packs. He's like, "Oh, I got to be on for that." I was like, all right, we'll make it happen.
Awesome.
Anyways, let's get into some more music. The next track we're going to play is from stage 6. It's called The Great Battleship, Queen Desta. All right, that was from stage 6, titled The Great Battleship, Queen Desta, composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou. What'd you guys think?
That was very epic. It was very big and grand. I thought it was very cool.
I loved it when it kicked it up to the next level with all of the different percussion coming in and the heavy sweeping pads. It just really took a great track up, and I loved it.
Yeah, I don't want to reference Lunar again, but I can't help it because those high horns just harken back to the Silver Star story, and then there's those stabs too. It's just like reminds it. I wonder if they were just like, man, we love Lunar. How are we going to kind of hint this in? Yeah, I'm sure it's a coincidence, but I really like this track. I thought there's great energy, and I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and even like the title, The Great Battleship, like it feels like an RPG. Like it's so, everything's so big. Like, and since these are the track titles that are taken out of the game, it's like they thought about this, and this was I don't know. There was so much attention to detail in this game that I thought was so cool.
Yeah. So real quick, I kind of want to take a sidestep here. When this game was released, New Corporation held a high score contest. So what this means is you play the game, submit your scores, and you could win a bunch of different prizes. So first place was an iMac. And second place was an MD player, kind of like a boombox for mini discs. And the third place was an MD Walkman, a mini disc Walkman. And I just want to say congrats to Gentaro-san for getting a high score of 100. Jesus, what number is that?
It looks like 16,700,000 points.
Yeah.
Dang. Yeah, you had to put those commas in there.
Commas in there. I was like, there's too many zeros. I can't even
so many
read that.
numbers.
Thanks, Gene, for adding those commas in. Yeah, 16,700,000 points for winning nice, fancy new Blueberry iMac on his desk. So congrats to you.
Yeah, I loved it when games did stuff like that. I remember as a kid having Vector Man on the Sega Genesis, and right on the front of the box it said like win like $10,000 or something. And when we did that episode, I don't remember exactly what you had to do to win. It may have just been be the first person to beat the game or something,
and like submit a code or something.
So at the end of the credits, there was like a code that was specific to that cartridge, and it was just so crazy to think that back then they would do so much for you to get you to play your games, and then nowadays you buy a game for $60 and they don't even give you the full game. Like they want you to spend another $120 in DLC. And
yeah, no, I know what you mean. I kind of miss those days of having contests and winning. Yeah, there's some leaderboard stuff in games nowadays, but it doesn't have the same. It's not like drop the ball running. It doesn't have that same kind of feel, I guess.
Yeah, it gets you to want to buy the game right away because you're in the stores and you see, oh wow, Vector Man's got a contest. I can win $10,000. I need to get this game now so I can be the one that wins. And now it's, I don't know,
of course it was a marketing thing, but at the same time,
it's memorable. I mean, every game has a leaderboard. It's like, cool, this person is like the top in the world. That's nice for
in
them.
Counter-Strike Go, awesome. Yeah, like, man, props. But this was like, 16 million points. I don't remember how many points I had, but I don't think it was even like a tenth of that.
Yeah, so that person was collecting all them scary fruit.
Yeah,
they were getting all the paths that were dangerous. I mean, and that is a pretty good amount of money to drop on a brand new computer for someone just to get them to play your game.
Yeah.
It could have been like, here's a free soundtrack, or here's a free boxing game.
Yeah, here's a free map.
Yeah.
I want to actually talk about the scoring mechanic because we haven't gotten a chance to talk about it yet. It's really cool. So every level, you get 5 minutes. And usually stages have like 2 or 3 parts. And every time the stage moves over, you'll get another 5 minutes. So you have a total of 10 minutes to beat the whole first stage, 1-1 and 1-2. So that's one of the things that they do for the score. If you take 2 minutes, then you get 8 minutes total to beat the remaining half. And so there's that. There's all the collection of fruit. There's the various different. Sometimes it's just like gold coins scattered around.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's super secret areas that'll have like a graphic of an X68,000. You pick those up, you get 68,000 points.
Yeah.
I found one of those, and I was like, "What is that?" Oh, 68,000 points. It looks like a computer. That's probably what that was.
Yeah. It's really funny because on the official website that's now done by Colavier, they have a section where they talk about the scoring, and they mention that some of the bosses, or they mention the scoring that you get for some of the bosses. Like certain enemy that you kill will give you 1,000 points, or one will give you 5,000 points. And there's one section it's very tongue in cheek, but they say like, here's a boss that is called the 2,000 point boss or something like that. When you kill it, you actually get no points. Why? Because they found that there's a bug in the game. That the makers found that there's a bug in the game where it actually doesn't give you any points. So they're like, oh well, I guess we screwed up. It was probably people going for this contest. They're like, why didn't that give me any points?
Yeah.
And they brought it up, but of course, you don't have patches, so you can't fix it. So it's like, well, that's part of the experience.
Well, and it's fair for everyone too. So it's not like anyone else got points. So.
Yeah. Anyways, let's get into some more tunes. James, I think you're up next.
Yeah. Next up, we have another boss theme. It's called Ferica the Sad Goddess, and this is the PSG version. All right, you just heard Ferica, the Sad Goddess, which is the Stage 7 boss for the Adventures of Little Ralph.
The bass on this one is very, very punchy, very rolly. I don't know how to say.
It has like a very pop kind of feel to it, almost like it gave me almost like an emo-ish. It had a sad feel, but it had like this poppy, like cotton candy emo feel to it. And then there was that part in the middle where it sounded like almost like dial-up internet, like the sound like wasn't loading fast enough, and you just,
like it was around the loop. Hold on, let's hear that again real quick. Let's see, like I think it's around the minute mark.
Yeah, it was almost like your modem is like trying to pull down some information.
Yeah, that bass solo, where did that come from?
I don't know. Do you want to hear that in the instrumental version?
Yeah.
Let's see how that sounds.
Yeah, see, I'm really curious about the instrumental version for this one because I thought this track also had some of that dissonance where things almost sound a little out of tune. So I'm curious as to how it sounds.
Yeah, let's take a listen. We'll kind of skip ahead to that part. Hang on. So that actually sounded very coherent.
Yeah.
And you could hear all of the notes. And I think when the PSG version just kind of muddles them all together because there's not like a lot of disconnect. Maybe some of the dynamics are lost. And so you just kind of get this like whirlwind of sound. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I liked it still anyway.
Well, and I'm really happy too that I'm sure that when they were making this like PSG type version that they were like, oh, it doesn't quite have the same feel, but instead of making it have that feel, they kind of stayed a little bit more true-ish maybe to what it would have sounded like. They're like, oh, we have to put limitations on it or else this is going to become something more modern than what it already is.
Yeah, smoke and mirrors aside, they're like, still got to kind of tone it down a little bit. All right, so we've kind of mentioned all the different facets of the game. Let's talk about the graphics a little bit, something we haven't brought up yet, and I think the game is gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. And one of the things, too, that right off the bat, you're like, okay, this is a sprite-based game, and it feels very much like the games you'd play on the Super Nintendo or stuff like that, but the level of detail and like realism, I guess, the style is so advanced. It's so crazy. Like, it's not just flat buildings. They're not just, seeing them from the full profile. There's things that are in perspective and lots of color variation. It's really cool. So even like that quote unquote PSG type stuff, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that make this a lot more modern than maybe what you could have gotten on a Super Nintendo or a Genesis.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth. So in the beginning, you're playing through the town, and they do this thing throughout the game where you kind of go inside buildings and then go out, and it transitions to a new scene so seamlessly. You're like, whoa, first I was looking at a cathedral, now I'm looking at a forest, and then it just does a really great job of not feeling overwhelming. So it kind of goes from less detailed to more detailed, and there's so much depth. And like, I'm not usually a person that notices the graphics on 2D games, but every new area, I was like, whoa, look at the ice area backgrounds with all of the giant sort of pillars and everything, or like buildings in the background. There's sort of like almost Christmassy, but in a creepy way.
Right.
And so even the very first level with the town just has so much detail. I stopped and just admired it for a little while, actually.
Yeah, I like even the attention to detail in like the forest, where you have the kind of sunbeams kind of breaking through the trees and causing this little kind of glint of sunshine in a very dark place, and like everything, like the animation for Ralph is very fluid. I always give it the ladder test, and whenever a character is on a ladder or even on a rope swing, watching the amount of frames they put into the actual animation sequence is always something that I kind of keep an eye on. And him kind of moving up and down the ladders, there's so many different variations of how he moves around and shuffles, and I think that makes it seem so much more alive.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because I remember when I was playing it, I was playing it right around the time that I first started getting into speedrunning. So like my mindset was like, how can you do things faster? And climbing ropes and ladders, you can actually do really, really fast in this game. You do like a jump, and you can just like keep flipping up, and
Right.
just fly right up ladders and ropes. It's really cool. So it was really neat to see that there's so much to just the way that the game was programmed and how it interacts with the background, that it feels so fluid. It was really neat.
Yeah, and let's not forget the kind of look and feel to the 2D fighter. That actually is very clean as well, and I think it stacks up against maybe some of the early, or maybe like Street Fighter 1. It kind of has that look to it, but it behaves a lot more like Street Fighter 2, but I think that the graphic actually maybe more like a Final Fight or something like that.
Yeah, like Art of Fighting.
Yeah, Art of Fighting, something like that. Yeah.
It's really good detail, like anatomy, the movement.
And that's funny because his jumping animations, even though there's a lot of frames of animation there, they still went in to make it look kind of like an awkward jump. Do you know what I mean? It's so it feels almost like a Mario jump, like his legs are kind of like bling, you know, like that. It's very unnatural, but it's very animated at the same time.
No, I mean, the attention to detail was great. One of the things, too, with talking about games that are very complex looking, a lot of times you can get, like characters can get lost, or different things you're trying to collect can get like kind of visually muddy. Yeah. But they did a really good job of keeping the backgrounds very detailed, but in a range to where the contrast wasn't as high. So like it was still very colorful, lots going on, lots of detail, but whenever you're in front of it, it's not like you disappear.
Yeah, there were never any points where I felt like that caused any issues. Like there were maybe 2 or 3 points where I'm like, oh, I didn't realize it was a platform. But it's never over a pit or something that's going to cause a death. And you figure it out so quickly that you don't even notice. The vast majority of it, it's really great contrast between foreground and background. And there's a really nice flow to this game. I mean, it's designed with speedrunning in mind, but in general, you can sort of run forward and attack and jump without stopping
at
probably
all, right?
Like 70% of the game, except for like some of the harder, tricky jumps and things like that. And it was designed with that kind of thing in mind, because I think they really are like, let's do this 2D thing and polish it to a mirror shine. Let's take all of the ideas from games that have come before and really just take it to its limit.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, some of the like secret areas rely on. There's this one in the sewer level where you have to hit an enemy, but instead of killing it, you like let it do damage, so you bounce off to the side, which is like, oh right. Because we have those stun animations, you kind of get knocked back, and then you get to a secret area with a bunch of bonus points. I like replayed that area like 3 or 4 times to try to figure out why am I not making that jump?
Yeah, and I think that the kind of the look and the graphic style, the most important thing for us today is that it still holds up so beautifully. Like you can pick up this game, and this would be, I mean, they could release this as an indie title for people who didn't know that this was, done in 1999, and I guarantee it would fly off the shelves. If this made it on like the Switch or PS4, I think it would do really, really well. Or even iOS, maybe they can even figure that out somehow.
Yeah, it's funny, while you were talking about like the whole like being able to move quickly and how it feels like it was designed like that, I actually looked on speedrun.com, and there is a run submitted there's one run, and it's 4 hours and 11 minutes by someone that's C19000, and it was only 5 months ago. So
wow,
someone has stumbled upon it, and they used PSTV to do it. So so it's kind of neat that.
4 hours, really that long?
I feel like it could be done faster.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you will see people that will play through a game and they'll just submit it. There's no other. Right. It's like a free world record, but 4 hours probably sounds pretty extreme.
Right. I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's get into some more music. This is from Stage 8, and this is the boss theme called Boss Change, and this is where the final boss kind of changes its form, and the track is titled Destarroza. All right, the track was titled Destarroza, which is the Stage 8 boss change or boss transformation track, composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou for The Adventures of Little Ralph on the PlayStation.
Wow, what a change from the very, very beginning of that track is, not too intense. And then it's just like you just fired a pistol and everything just took off racing.
Yeah,
my
ears are still ringing.
Compare that to the first track, which is like happy town theme, and we got like this cheese grater bass, and you don't think it can get any more energetic, and they just keep adding more on top of that track.
It's pretty intense. Do you want to hear the PSG version just a little? I'm curious how it translates. I can't remember.
I feel like this could probably translate pretty well.
You think so? All right, let's take a listen. That was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely loses some of the intensity, but I think that's actually a good thing for this track. The normal orchestral version was just really, really, really
rough.
Intense.
Yeah, it was hard. Yeah. All right, so let's move on to our next track. Gene, what do you got?
So the next track we have is Mount Etona from The Adventures of Little Ralph. That was Mount Etona from The Adventures of Little Ralph, composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou.
I love this track. The first part sounds like it should be in a shooter, though. Mm-hmm. It really has like a, I don't know, like a Gunbird feel or something to it.
Yeah, there was like almost three parts. I felt like there was the very, very beginning, and then there was the transition to what the song became. And
with a walking bass and everything.
Yeah, and for a second I was like, okay, cool, this is really cool. And then it gave me this feeling like I was about to watch like the attract mode on a really early 3D fighter, like where you know like how they're always like showing off the motion capture on the really ugly polygons, but it's like really kind of dancey and like exciting and energetic, and then it kind of transitioned into something a little bit different. So the track was very cool. I did like this one a lot. It felt very grand and big and beautiful at the same time. And really, it really makes me sad to see that the names weren't broken out, because in this soundtrack we're seeing a lot of different styles. Like there's some tracks that maybe if you put them side by side don't really seem like they come from the same game, and I'm wondering if that was by choice or maybe different composer, different styles.
Right.
So I mean, there was a lot of this game that feels like it was done very, very specifically.
Right.
I'd love to know the division of labor, because some songs it's like, yeah, these 3 or 4 are kind of in the same genre, but since there's so much music, it's like, did they have one person compose and say, okay, you do the PSG one, or like do these 30 PSG ones? Like, there's so much variation in the music that there's really no way to tell.
Yeah, it could have been too with the PSG that it was just like, okay, we have a driver that swaps out the guitar sounds with this tone and this tone, and they probably didn't do any work at all, or it's hard to know until we get a hold of one of these guys, which so far been unsuccessful. We're not going to know, but it's a good point that you bring that up. It's a very distinct difference between a lot of these tracks, and saying it was all one person would be remarkable, having that much diversity in a soundtrack.
Well, and even hearing how good some of the PSG versions sound makes me wonder if even some of those could have been the original song and then expanded more, like how the industry was kind of doing with, remaking games. Like, all right, let's bring it to this new, full orchestra sound. And it's, I don't know, maybe that could have been part of it too. But all in all, this game is just, it's full of so many surprises.
Yeah. So it's so funny to me, we're talking about the PSG and stuff, the PSG version. This is originally designed for the Sharp X68000, right?
Yeah.
There's no PSG on the Sharp X68000. So even then it was weird. So it's funny that they carry, there's so many oddities in this game that I just love it. I love every bit of it. So let's kind of talk about our thoughts. I mean, we've been saying our thoughts the entire episode. I loved it, and I think you guys would agree.
Yeah, I totally loved it.
I wasn't that excited when you said, "Oh, you have to play this game." I'm like, "Well, whatever. It's another generic
You blew me
action."
off for like a week, dude.
Well, pretty much. And then I started playing it. I'm like, "Yeah, I can totally see why we're doing this episode." It's tough to surprise me or get me excited about a 2D platformer, especially one that's like 20 years old. This one delivers. It's a great game.
That's like, you just tell me it's a 2D platformer that's 20 years old and I get more excited.
I know, but it's like, how many of them have I played? I feel like there's nothing else that they could do.
Yeah.
I've seen it all.
I've seen all the good stuff anyway. Yeah.
And this one was totally out of left field, and it was definitely one of those underrated classics that I wish I had discovered a long time ago.
Yeah. And a lot of people are realizing that and trying to get their hands on it too.
Yeah, I was actually looking it up because I was like, I'm just curious. I'm always curious as to how much things are going for. And, because my PlayStation can do Japanese games. So it's actually almost $400 for a copy of this game.
Oof.
And that's with, the case and the artwork.
I can see it.
Yeah. And I saw, people had just the disc to sell, and those were going for around $100 as well. So, I mean, there are people out there that understand the value of this game, and that could just be a limited press, or it could also be that people that have played it are like, wow, this game is really good, and no one's really heard of it.
These prices fluctuate all the time, but I think they're just going to go up because these games are getting older, and their fidelity is, degrading, and it's just, they're not going to be around.
Well, just look
in
at
circulation. They're some are getting lost.
That Dragon Fighter episode we did, I think within like a 4-year span, it went from like $80, $100 to like $1,200 to buy a cartridge of it, and it's like, what? Like in a short period of time, people realized like how rare it was, and it just as retro games become more popular, it seems like people are very, very interested in collecting. And
now we all have jobs. Like all of these kids who lived in there, we all have jobs and we all have money now. So it's like, well, $1,200. My kid doesn't need to eat tomorrow.
You hear so many people that want complete collections of everything, and then you see, Instagram, and I think social media has helped fuel this a little bit. You got something to show off, but you see pictures of people that have every single color of the Nintendo 64 in box with the controllers in box, and just like, why do you need 15 Nintendo 64s that you're not playing?
See, I look at that, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. I couldn't do that myself.
Yeah,
I mean, like
Yeah.
it's like a momentary like that is totally cool, and then I don't ever want to own anything like that.
I've moved so many times and lived in so many small places that when I see those collections, I'm like, where would I even sleep if I had them?
Right. A lot of other online review sites and different, retro gaming sites have really had positive things to say about the game too. There was Games Collection, which is a website that did a review of the game. They get 9.5 out of 10. Retro Spirit Games give it a 80 out of 100. And I mean, these are just two that I found, but I mean, it seems like there's, some fan sites, people who just really adore this game, and it's still in that hidden, I hate saying hidden gems, but it's still in that hidden gems vein.
Yeah, I saw a lot of articles that were sort of like top 20 underrated classics on the PlayStation 1 you should try out. And this definitely shows up in a lot of those kinds of lists.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into one of our final tracks here. This is called the End of Nightmare. This is actually from the easy ending. So if you beat the game on simple mode, this is the ending you'd hear. So let's take a listen. We'll be right back. All right, that was End of Nightmare, which is the easy ending for The Adventures of Little Ralph on the PlayStation.
At first, this track I was not digging too much. I was like, it's all right. And then there was those Genesis, not Sega Genesis, but like Phil Collins Genesis, like drums. And then I was like, wow, this is great. Like, this is a really cool track. It's really in your face, and it feels like you're flying above the clouds. I mean, so the beginning part just felt kind of like phoned in, but I think that was part of the transition. It was like it was building up to something else, but if that was how it was, if I'd only listened to the very beginning of the credits and shut the game off, I'd have been like, I kind of feel like that was underwhelming.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned flying above the clouds, because one of my thoughts was like, did you ever see the movie Raputa, the Miyazaki film?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the little boy who's playing trumpet on the tower or the building that he lives in, it kind of reminded me of that, and it kind of jumps into this kind of like flying through the clouds. And so it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was thinking that exact scene.
It reminded me of like the Never-Ending Story.
Okay,
like flying on the Falcor.
A little bit of Perfect Strangers. Little days go by. Is that what it is?
I mean, this is like a perfect encapsulation of what I think all of us love about 80s and 90s Japanese video game music. It's sort of, looking at it now, it's a little odd, or maybe interesting. It's kind of, modern games are trying to recreate this exact sound. All these modern chiptune retro games. Old games were doing this, and this is kind of like a swan song, like say goodbye to the old days. And it's such a fitting like ending sound for that kind of feeling.
Yeah. Oh, man. Great. Man, we had a lot of music today.
And that's not even...
Yeah, that's like a third of it?
Yeah. It's
maybe.
Well, like a third of it in terms of like the number of tracks for one version, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of music in this episode. This is going to be a long episode, too. Maybe hit the 2-hour mark. Who knows? Anyways, yeah, so today we covered Chippoke Ralph no Daiboken, or The Adventures of Little Ralph, composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou. I had a blast, and you guys did too, I'm sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. If you want to know more about the show, where can they find us?
You can find us online at pixelatedaudio.com for all the show notes and track lists. You can also find us on social media, mainly Twitter is where we're doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then our Discord. Don't forget about our Discord.
Discord is where all the action happens.
Yeah.
And we got some plans for doing some stuff in Discord, maybe at a later date, and we'll figure it out as things go. But if you like the show, please, we invite you to leave us a review on iTunes. It takes a few seconds. It means a lot. Send us an email. Just if you like the show, if you like the music, comment on the website. That's all really awesome. If you want to help support the show, we invite you to check our Patreon out. It's going strong, and we have a lot of support so far. But things add up. We actually want to replace our sound system at some point when we can get enough funds to do that, and to make things a little bit easier for us and be able to record more. So,
we just sent in a microphone that needed to be repaired, and so the Patreon helped
cover that. Yeah. So thank you guys so much for supporting us this far. If you're new to the show, we got 98 episodes for you to go through.
Yeah.
So
we mentioned like Dragon Fighter. There's an NES game that was really cool and amazing music.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Vector Man was another really old one. It was like in the top
Lunar,
early 10. Yeah,
Lunar with Irodai. We had him on, and the guy was a riot, man.
Yeah.
Like, how often do you get a chance to hear a composer from your childhood pick up an ocarina and start playing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was a fabulous episode.
Yeah.
That was so,
and that's
so
another
fun.
thing to mention about Discord is that a lot of times if we know we were able to get a composer on ahead of time, we will ask if you guys have questions. So you can write in, and we will ask that composer the question that you're interested about.
And we may or may not have one coming up in our next episode. So definitely drop by the Discord and give us a hand with some of that work. We also have some news that we kind of should have brought up in the beginning of the show, but it kind of makes sense to talk about it now. So, as we're reaching episode 100, we've done 99 episodes, James and I. Gene's been on a few episodes in the past as a guest. And as we move forward into what I'm calling, and maybe you guys can chime in here and crack me on the head, I'm kind of declaring that the next, from 100 plus N is going to be our kind of season 2. We're going to change things up a little bit, and hopefully in a good way. We have a lot more content that we want to start putting out, but we noticed that over the last few months, this year, it's been harder and harder for just James and I to make all the time that we want for doing recording. So we've been talking about it for a few months now, And we want to announce that we are bringing Gene on as our third official member, our third host of Pixelated Audio. So
yeah, and it became really apparent. I think that we were having trouble. We were having trouble keeping up with the episodes, and then there was the time that I got sick, and Gene filled in for me, and it just worked out perfectly. I was able to rest, and there's different things that are adding up in our lives, and the show is just continuing to build. So getting help with research, editing, all that stuff is just such a huge help. And we like Gene so much. He's been on the show more than anyone else that we've ever had. So, and it just works out so great.
Yeah, we got a lot of good feedback about you being on before, and so we're like, it just works. We all snap together really well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and you'll be hearing a lot more from Gene and his miniseries coming up. Have you announced?
No, I haven't. So after episode 100, which unfortunately I'll probably be out of town for that one, but hopefully the very first one after that, 101, is going to be a solo show that I'm doing with a miniseries where I'm covering the music of deceased composers primarily, but as a way to do a spotlight on more of a history of a particular composer, rather than focusing on a specific game, just sort of covering the development of a composer over time. And I've just... there's so many competing emotions when you do episodes research for that kind of stuff. Right. It's like, it's very touching. It's sort of like, it's very inspiring. You get to learn a lot about things just by doing a lot of deep research. And it's been so much fun up to this point. I'm really excited to share that with you guys. And
we're excited about it too. We've been talking about it for like a few months now. And, this is, Gene will be doing most of these solo, but it is kind of a collaborative effort. We're all trying to pitch in and help where we can to make this a true Pixelated Audio kind of production thing. And so this is going to be really great, I think, for us kind of moving forward with the show. Some episodes it'll be just me and James, or just me and Gene, or Gene and James, or just one of us solo. But that way we can keep putting out good content and, stay fresh. Gene brings, I think, James has the very artistic approach to a lot of, his explanations of the music, and we've got a lot of feedback on that. My more maybe technical stuff and kind of views on the development side, and it's kind of the holy trinity with Gene on the more composition and understanding like kind of musical aspects that we've always kind of been missing a little bit in Pixelated Audio.
Yeah. So. I always wanted to learn more about music, but I don't have so much time. So there's only so many times you guys can listen to me say like it reminds me of Terminator, or like it's like a theatrical production or something. But that's one of the things that I definitely also thought was kind of missing from the show a little bit, and I'm really excited to see where this season 2 really goes. So.
Okay, so you're going to roll with the season 2.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Sure, whatever. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening, and we had a lot of fun today. I hope you enjoyed the music. If you want to listen to the soundtrack, you can purchase it at Egg Music. We'll leave a link in the show notes. The track taking us out, this is the normal ending called Little Hero's Story, and it's the PSG version composed by Hiroshi Kuronuma, Naoki Tsuchiya, and Hideki Satou. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you back in a few weeks for the next episode. before we do that, we need an intro person. So who wants to do the intro?
Oh, I forgot we didn't do that.
Maybe Gene.
Gene.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
This is Pixelated Audio, episode 99, featuring the music from The Adventures of Little Ralph on the PlayStation.
Try to say that again, but less robotic.
All right. This is Pixelated Audio, episode 99, featuring the music from The Adventures of Little Ralph on the Sony PlayStation.
I don't know how you made it sound more robotic.
Fuck.